Hey guys, it's Matt. You might be wondering why I'm wearing this big duck hat. Well, I need to get a haircut, and I am too lazy to get one. So you might be saying to yourselves, Matt, aside from you looking like crap, what are we going to be looking at today? Well, today we are going to be looking at the Christopher Reeve Superman movie that introduced me to the franchise, Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, or as I like to call it, oh my god, guys, look, I'm wearing a completely different outfit than I did in the first part of the video. Don't you guys love the continuity issues my videos have? Like I said, Superman 4: The Quest for Peace was the first Christopher Reeve Superman movie that introduced me to that specific franchise. And do I regret that? No. I was a child. I literally saw the DVD for Superman 4 in a Marshall's DVD bin, and I asked my mom if I could have it, and she said yes. And I have the DVD right here. This is the DVD right here. As you can see, Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. Let's talk about the Superman franchise in its humble beginnings. So as we all know, in 1978, Warner Brothers and a group of two producers, Alexander and Ilya Salkind, put together Superman the movie. And also another fun fact, the director of Superman the movie, Richard Donner, not only did that movie, but he also did the Lethal Weapon franchise and Goonies. So the guy is kind of a household name in movie pop culture. And as we all know, Superman the movie is considered to be one of the greatest movies and greatest superhero movies of all time, and introduced new special effects that were never used in movies previously. As we all know, when Superman 2 came out, Richard Donner was no longer part of the project due to tensions between him and the Salkinds, and then was replaced by failed comedy director Richard Lester, who made a bunch of crappy Beatles movies. I like the Beatles, but those movies really aren't that funny. And if you have watched the Superman franchise, we all know that Superman 3 is considered to be one of the worst movies in the franchise, because Richard Lester decided, oh, you know what? Wouldn't it be great, instead of making Superman a very serious movie that, had little bits of comedy here and there like Donner did, let's just make it full-on slapstick and hire Richard Pryor to be in the movie. And let's give him the most screen time. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Richard Pryor's comedy. I think he's one of the greatest comedians and actors of all time. But he is so unfunny in this movie. And this movie is an omen for what we're about to look at today. So after the disaster that was Superman 3, the Salkinds tried making other movies in their time as producers. They made a Supergirl movie, which is pretty bad. Originally, Christopher Reeve was supposed to be in that movie, but because he was disappointed with how Superman 3 was, he decided to not have a cameo in that movie. And on top of that, they also made a Santa Claus movie, which I've heard pretty bad things about. And that was actually the final thing that basically had the Salkinds decide, oh, you know what, maybe we should stop making fucking movies because we're bad at it. So then in the year 1985, the Salkinds were at a film festival, and they met the heads of a cheap B-movie film studio known as Cannon Group. And basically Cannon, as I just said, was known for making really bad B-movies, such as Missing in Action, which is essentially Chuck Norris's ripoff of Rambo, Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo. Yeah, that's actually where that saying comes from, blah, blah, blah 2, Electric Boogaloo. It comes from that movie. They made a He-Man movie, which we'll get into when we discuss more about Superman 4. And they made a movie where Hercules fights a bear. And so, of course, Cannon Group decided to take the rights from the Salkinds and decided that this was going to be their biggest hit. But Matt, you just said that they had other movies like Breakin' and Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo. Those had to be hits. Actually, no, you're wrong. The problem was that Canon was financing its films by selling the television and home video rights in advance before the movie even came out. And of course, this failed with their films that costed over $5 million. So obviously, they didn't really have a good business model. And because of this, the studio had gone 6 years without a major hit. And the studio was saved from bankruptcy after a deal with Warner Brothers in which they provided them $75 million to repay their loans in exchange for distribution rights to its upcoming films that included Superman 4. And so you might be saying, oh wow, that's great. They got money and now they can finance this movie. Originally, the budget was supposed to be $36 million, which if I'm correct from what I saw on inflation calculators, that's almost about maybe a little under $200 million, but it's still up there in today's money. However, Canon decided to do the most dumbest fucking thing in the history of movie production. They decided to take the budget that was $36 million and reduce it to $17 million. This would then be put into their other projects, because basically from what I could gather from the information I got is that they believe that, because it's a Superman movie, nerds and people who like superheroes, like they won't care what the effects look like. Just because it's a superhero movie, they'll watch it and they'll like it. Oh, could they have been more wrong? So as some of you may or may not know, John Cryer, who you may know from 2.5 Men and some other 80s movies that I can't even remember. According to him, he played Lex Luthor's nephew Lenny, and apparently Christopher Reeve took him aside during filming one day and told him that this movie was going to be terrible. And apparently, according to Cryer, they lost all their money during the production of this movie. They literally went over budget. They literally ran out of money. So, from that, you can automatically assume that this movie is a piece of shit. And you are fucking correct. Here are some highlights. Can you believe that when I was a kid, I believed these were the greatest effects I've ever seen? But now that I'm 21, I'm like, wow, what the fuck were they thinking? And so there are a lot of issues with this movie. For one thing, a lot of it is filmed in one specific area in England. And, I'm not saying that's a problem. A lot of footage from the first 3 Superman movies were filmed in some locations in England. However, this whole movie is filmed in one area of England called Milton Keynes, which is literally a more westernized city that you usually wouldn't see in England. That's what I gathered. The movie critic Oliver Harper does a really great documentary on why the studio decided to film at Milton Keynes. And I can definitely understand why. They have $17 million. It's not like they can fly to different, countries and different locations with that amount of money at the time. So they had to improvise. And do I think that's a dumb idea? No. Either way, even if they had, the $36 million to make this movie, they probably still would have done that because it's cheaper and it's easier. However, there are a lot of glaring problems with this decision. There are so many shots in this movie that look so fucking empty. Okay? Here's the scene where Superman is giving his final speech at the United Nations. Now, what do you see wrong with this picture? What do you see wrong with that? What's wrong with it? Is it the smoke coming up from the literal factory behind him? the literal lamppost behind him. It's like they just filmed this in a random ass parking lot. And they probably did. What I don't understand is that one point that Oliver Harper brings up in his documentary on Superman 4 and why they filmed in Milton Keyes is that why didn't they use any matte paintings to provide like a sort of backdrop for like any scenes that were supposed to be the exact location that the whole scene was supposed to be centered around? How come we don't have an actual like at least photo or matte painting of the outside of the United Nations? You literally did a whole set of the United Nations when Superman gives his speech about how he's going to get rid of all nuclear weapons, but you can't even make a fucking matte painting. You just decide like, oh, okay, yeah, let's just let him do this no backdrop, no nothing. That smoke coming up in the background, that's fine, keep that in. All the lampposts that you see, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. They definitely have that at the United Nations. And also the other scene where Superman is like doing his double date with Lois and Stacey Warfield, who's like the love interest of Clark. The scene where like he goes in the car and like flies away. Even that scene, the background is like so empty and boring. At least add like something that's like, you know, like some matte paintings of like high rises in Manhattan, because that's essentially what Metropolis is. Metropolis is a literal fictional version of Manhattan. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. Okay? So why not just get a bunch of artists to do matte paintings and add in some background that makes it look believable? Like, oh, look, he's actually in Metropolis. Like, wow, they used a really small budget, but they used it to their advantage, you know? They did movie-making methods that made it look believable. Hell, even the smallest budget movies of the 80s that are considered to be, like, cult classics, they even do that. But Canon was like, nah, that's fine. That's fine. There's a smokestack coming up in the background. That's fine. What? You can see a warehouse in the background? That's fine. No one will notice. No one will care. It's a superhero movie. And what I find hilarious too is that they were planning a Superman 5. I'm not lying. You can find photos of that on Google Images, and that's considered a fact. That is a literal fact that they wanted to do a 5th Superman movie. Okay, but other than all of like the production issues, what else was the problem here? Well, the other problem was, trying to find a director. Of course, they wanted to try and get Richard Donner back, but he was too busy with other movies, so he said no. They also wanted to get Wes Craven, who, as you may know, directed Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream. He also made a movie about the Swamp Thing to try and prove to like movie studios that he could make an action movie and wasn't just like some one-trick pony who does like horror movies. However, him and Christopher Reeve didn't really get along, so he was canned. And so Cannon decided on a little small, not so well-known director named Sidney J. Furie. He made like a bunch of like, I would say they're B movies, but one of them was like a horror movie, and like Martin Scorsese gave that movie a lot of praise. So I don't know, maybe I can't really hate on Sidney J. Furie for that. I mean, if Scorsese is giving you a lot of praise for a movie you made, then maybe you're doing something right. But other than trying to find a director for this movie, I think Furie was kind of fucked over in this. Originally, the movie was supposed to be about like maybe like an hour and 50 minutes, 2 hours, and there are a lot of deleted scenes of this movie. There's literally like an alternate Nuclear Man, and I'm not going to get too much into Nuclear Man. All I'm going to say is that he's like the stereotypical piece of like 80s cheesy movies, so that's all I'll say. But there was an alternate Nuclear Man that Lex makes before the one that you see in this movie originally. And of course, what does Canon do? They get rid of that because they were like, no, the movie's too long, we gotta shorten it. No, hour and a half, that's as much as we'll go. And I've looked at all of the deleted scenes. Why they would get rid of it, I have no idea. I don't. Because it adds a bit more context to the story. Like when Nuclear Man abducts Lacey Warfield because suddenly he has a crush on her. Like, that's just brought out of nowhere. But there's so many deleted scenes that kind of are like, like, that it provides more context, And I know some of you might be saying, can this movie have some sort of redemption? I personally think so. There's actually a really good YouTube channel known as A Price Productions that does like a lot of remastered scenes of Superman 4. And it's the quality of the first three films. They're good effects, at least for the time, but it's believable. They look believable. In this movie, they're horrible. But what A Price Production is doing is basically fixing that. I think if you were to give Superman 4 an entire revamp, like an entire digital remaster, I think people would come around to it and be like, oh, this movie actually isn't so bad at all. It was just fucked over. So, James Gunn, if you're watching, please do that. I would really appreciate it, considering this piece of shit was the first fucking Christopher Reeve movie that introduced me to the franchise. I would like to see it get some sort of digital remaster. Now, you might be saying to yourself, what were the plans for canon Superman 5? I'll tell you what the plans were. They were going to use the deleted scenes with the alternate Nuclear Man and basically make him like Bizarro. And to me, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't. It makes absolutely no sense. How are you going to make a movie with deleted scenes that have a completely different context for the movie that you want? So you might be saying to yourself, well, Matt, how did the movie do? Not too well. Not too well. And of course, the biggest complaint of all the critics was the effects. It looks like shit. And because of the failure of Superman 4, Superman 5 would never see the light of day. Elia Salkind did attempt to make a new script for a different Superman 5 called Superman Reborn, which would basically retcon these movies out of the franchise and basically start where Superman 2 left off. I've actually read that script, and it's actually pretty fucking good. It's up there with the Star Wars Duel of the Fates script. When you compare, that script to Rise of Skywalker, Superman Reborn is a much better script than Superman 3 and 4 combined. Actually, no, I take that back. Superman 4's script isn't that bad. It's decent. It's a good story. I like the message it has. It was a message that Christopher Reeve was really passionate about, and I respect that. A lot of actors like to, write stories about certain topics and issues that they're passionate about, that they want to bring to light. And I think, a movie like this, if it wasn't, fucked over by a cheap movie studio, that message would have been widely accepted. I think, if you had a high budget Superman 4 with the effects, with all the deleted scenes kept in, then I think it would have done fairly well in the movies. Would have topped Superman the movie or Superman 2? Probably not. But it would have been a great, continuation compared to whatever the fuck this was. But that's basically my general opinion of Superman 4. It was a movie that I was introduced to at a very young age. Basically, I introduced myself to it because I saw it and I was like, oh, I've never seen this Superman movie before. It has to be good. And of course, when I was a kid, I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. But now when I'm older, I'm like, nah, this ain't it. This is horrible. Looking back at it, Superman 4 is a movie that needs a little bit of extra help in a modern day sense. With a lot of, movie studios releasing digital remasters with additional footage or remastered effects like Star Wars and Star Trek The Motion Picture, I think this movie would do great as a digital remaster. With all the deleted scenes added in, with the effects fixed up and polished, I think if you were to give this movie a redemption, it would be a massive success. So like I said, James Gunn, if you somehow stumble upon this video, please do so. Get together with the heads of DC. Actually, he is one of the heads of DC, but get together with some of your colleagues at DC and Warner Brothers and try and convince them that this movie needs a redemption. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know that I hyped this video up a lot with like the teasers and like the special sneak peek. But basically this whole video was basically just to talk about my personal grievances with the movie itself and how I think it could be fixed in today's modern movie scene with like a digital remaster with polished effects and all that sort of stuff. But like I said, as it stands now, Superman 4 is still considered to be one of the worst movies and superhero movies to ever exist. So thank you guys very much for watching. Maybe next time I'll do a review on Superman 3. Who knows? Maybe I'll talk about how Superman 3 went through like a million rewrites before they decided on this piece of shit. So that's going to do it for today. I hope you all enjoyed. Like, subscribe, share with a friend, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.